This episode is brought to you by the European Coworking Assembly. We are everything Coworking Europe. If you head to the Coworking Assembly website, you can connect with our World Coworking, European Freelancers Week, Coworking Symposium, Coworking Library, and Coworking Tools.
Hello, folks, and welcome to this week's splendid edition of the European Coworking Values Podcast. I'm very, very excited. I have Stephen in the studio, and then I will ask him to say what he's known for and what would he like to be known for, and then we will get to why I'm so excited. So, Stephen, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for, sir?
Wow, that's a difficult one. So I'm one of the founders of Contingent.Works, a co-working space in Bromley. I do some other things besides that, mainly working in EdTech, educational technology. And what I'd like to be known for is, just as being somebody who was genuinely more use than they were harm to the world.
I like that. I love the answers people give on this. So here's what happened, folks. So there's David from Nook that a lot of you know, and he made Ewan come to our London Co-working Assembly breakfast, and then it turned out that Contingent.Works had a deeper story than just being another co-working space. And in a conversation, it came up that next Thursday, as you're listening to this, is the anniversary of the rise and fall of the Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars by David Bowie. And there's an event in Contingent.Works about that. So me and Stephen thought we'd better throw together a podcast about Bowie. And it is completely because we're Bowie fanboys and girls. And we want to find the connections between Bowie. So this is going to be very, very useful for you, I promise. But if you don't like Bowie, it might not be. So firstly, can you just say where Contingent.Works comes from? Because that was a really exciting thing for me. Because I asked Ewan at breakfast at Impact Brixton, and I thought he'd say, well, we're reimagining the future of work like most co-working spaces owner do. And then I was like, he slammed in with a Bromley contingent. So can you explain that bit?
Yeah, so the Bromley contingent were a sort of group of people that followed the Sex Pistols around back in the day. And, Susie Sue, Billy Idol, Steve Severin, a whole bunch of people. And not all of them came from Bromley. But we were sort of talking about opening a co-working space because I have long been critical of Bromley. And he said, well, why don't you do something to make it better? And we thought, wouldn't it be great to have a co-working space? And then, a couple of beers in, we said, yeah, for contingent workers. And then it's, Bromley Contingent. Oh, that's it. It's called Contingent and it's Bromley Contingent. That's what we're doing. So we've appropriated their name, which I'm sure, well, I don't know how they'd feel about that, but they'd probably hate it. But yeah, so that's where the name comes from. And what we are is, I think, a sort of creative, collaborative workspace. I mean, all of the things that people say about their co-working spaces. But there's little sort of Easter eggs buried where if you come around, you'll see little hints of Bowie, who has a Bromley legacy, the Bromley contingent. There's kind of little hidden signifiers here and there. So we're immensely proud of the space and the people that come there, our members, our friends. And yeah, we sort of feel like we're doing those heritages proud.
I love that. I'm in already. And say a little bit about the Ziggy Stardust event. Will he be there? Or
he will in spirit. We where to start? So we're having an event. Let's start there. It's next Thursday. It's in our space. You can find tickets on Eventbrite, and we'll put that in the show notes or whatever it is you do. I'll send you a link so you can put that up. But we've got some great photos and artworks on the walls. So we've got a hand-coloured print of Moon Age Daydream, the sort of back, the telephone box shot, the back cover by Terry Pastor, who did the airbrushing on the original sleeve. We've got, quite a few sort of interesting artifacts on the walls, and we're going to listen to the music, going to have a few beers, because it will be 50 years to the day that the album came out. And it was written and conceived in Bromley. The look was conceived in Bromley. The outfits were stitched together at Haddon Hall. So it's not really about Bromley, that album, but it sort of was born from the suburbs. And so we've created a map as well of all of the Bromley places in, London Borough, Bromley. So that includes Beckenham, that Bowie sort of hung about in around about that time. So it's kind of a bit of fun, but it's also us trying to sort of claim a bit of that heritage to what can sometimes seem like a town full of Primark and sort of stuff, to say, well, actually, other things happened here and we should celebrate those things.
Yeah. Do you know who William Will Brooker is? The professor from Kingston University that lived as Bowie for a year as part of an academic project.
I did not know. I now am going to be Googling that. I have never heard of that before.
So I'd only heard of it from the How to Think Like David Bowie book, and then there's Kingston is there's a new town square opening in Kingston, and our August event is in Kingston. So I'm going to track down that professor and see if I can get him to come to our event there, our co-working assembly event there. But he said, they're talking about like how Bromley is like very, even back in Bowie's time, was like very bland, but it was like the constraints of suburbia that made the creativity of the contingent and everything that came out of it. So very often boring places help people be more creative than the middle of Soho.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they can see the trains to London, so when you're a teenager living near the railway lines, as David Jones was, then you can't help but be drawn to that, right? Thinking, well, that train is going to that big glamorous city and it's full of coffee bars and jazz and stuff, or whatever was going through his head at that time. So you can see how that yearning is there. And then 20 years later or whatever it was for fans of the Sex Pistols, so it's not London, but it's so close that nobody bothers building big gig venues here. It's that kind of dynamic, I think, that drives that frustration. And let's be honest, people leave when they achieve stardom. They don't stay in Bromley. It's seen as a place to escape from in that respect. But we're trying to change that.
Yeah, I'm hoping that because the centre of town will always be the centre of town, but and it's important. And I'm not anti-cities, but more people. So a statistic that came up about Kingston is 45% of Kingston leave the borough to go and work, and a huge amount of those would have gone into London, and then some of them obviously go to airports and stuff like that. But we're a big thing we're talking about in the assembly is 15-minute cities, and imagine everybody stayed in Bromley and spent their money in Bromley and connected more in Bromley. And in Barking, which is in Zone 4, there's a whole film studio and everything opening up there as part of a bigger riverside development. And one of the things there is that is people. So there's 360, which is a workspace in the same ambience as yours, and if people, so many times people from, I bet this happens a lot, people from Bromley and people from Barking and people from Ilford and Kingston go into town and then they end up meeting other people from Bromley. And why don't we just stay where we were, because it's half the price and we could just do our stuff here. And I love going to town. So, I'm not saying you should never go into town, obviously, but we need to consider that aspect.
Yeah, well, when we were putting together the business plan, we identified this kind of donut around London that's outside the South Circular and inside the M25, where there just weren't that many co-working spaces. And, so the expectation is that if you wanted that kind of space, you go into the centre of London, which sort of seemed a bit strange to us. And we could see this decoupling of work and place going on in our own professional lives. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and then everybody decoupled work from place. And so, it's I think there is, a broader societal change going on in terms of people choosing their office now, which is a kind of, interesting thought, isn't it? But they're stamping their identity on their work more. Rather than the other way around, and I think that's quite healthy. And if we're thinking about stamping identity or assuming new identities, then that brings us neatly back to Bowie again. If that's where we want to go.
That was a seamless link there, Stephen. So imagine you had a few things that connected Bowie with co-working. Do you happen to have a list lying around?
I do, yeah. I wrote a list earlier because I promised you I'd give it some thought. But I don't want you to set too much store in this because I've given it about 10 minutes thought. So it might not hang together as much as it did first thing this morning. But anyway.
Are you saying we should hang on to ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely hang on to ourselves. So, the first thing I thought about was reinvention, which was kind of like where the conversation was just going, actually. But I like the way that Bowie did that, because it was out of necessity to begin with. Let's not forget, in the 60s, he had a string of failures with the Managed Boys and the King Bees and an album that sounded like Anthony Newley and one that was folksy and then, Space Oddity. And so it wasn't until like album 3 or 4, was it, until he hit his stride. And it, in each of those, I think he kind of reinvented himself a bit and was famous for it throughout his career. And, without wanting to sort of get to, pseudo Harvard MBA about it, there is something iterative about that. There is something sort of test and learn, keep what's essentially you, but, try a few things out that I think is useful for anyone, really, isn't it?
I agree. So it took him. One of the things that comes up about that era is the persistence, and he kept on doing things, kept on getting knocked back. And Will Brooker says it in his book. He's a little bit critical of him which hurts me, but I appreciate because he's being honest about someone he admires. He goes, Bowie was like, oh, I'm this working class guy. It's like his father had a good job. And so he was able to live at home and pursue music, which was probably even more unforgivable at that stage in life than it is now. So he had that luxury, but also he just kept on going. He kept on getting knocked back. He'd find a group of people, go and do something. And then there's something about this 7-year business cycle. And when he got in his stride, Brooker points out that he took him 7 years to get from A to B and start the journey as the Bowie we know. So yeah, I'm going to let you have the little Jim Collins Harvard MBA assessment there for sure, definitely.
Yeah, but we mustn't underestimate the reinvention though, because if we because we got the Ziggy event, I've been thinking about that a lot. The first gig, right, was in the Toby Jug in Tolworth, a pub that I happen to know. I don't know if you've ever been there. You're going to Kingston soon; it's just up the road. And when you imagine what that was like, I know what it was like in the early 90s. I can't imagine what it was like in the early 70s. And then you imagine the Ziggy costume and the band in their Spiders from Mars costumes. And nobody's ever, nobody's going, oh, that's Bowie doing Ziggy. They're going, what's this? I wonder what this is. Let's go down the Toby Jug tonight and see what's on. So there's an enormous amount of, daft bravery going on there as well. And I think it came from necessity in that he couldn't be himself. He wanted to, he'd done all that stuff with Lindsay Kemp. He wanted to be theatric. He wanted to kind of create a persona that he could inhabit. And so he thought, I wonder if you got Vince Taylor, the legendary Stardust Cowboy, and some spaceman, you put it all together, and that was a pop star, what would that look like? So it's not just he's trying things out. It's like he's really, going as far out as anybody dare go, and then sort of getting the reaction to that, and then seeing what he can do with that reaction.
Yeah, because I often think, and I've started reading even more about it again, and I read a lot about the birth and rise of like what we now call electronic music, but like house music and the rave scene in the 90s and everything from like, Paul Oakenfold to Soul II Soul and Hacienda and stuff. Is we just look at that now, you hear it on the radio, like the Sex Pistols are on, Jazz FM sometimes or something. Yeah, it's like or Radio 1, and we just think of that as the car or the, a Spitfire. It's just part of culture, but that was like crazily way out and weird in those days.
It was, I think. And I think, the second thing that I think we can learn as well is that kind of appropriation of ideas, or that kind of mixture of ideas. So, I mentioned Lindsay Kemp, but, he was reading, Kerouac and William Burroughs and taking the cut up techniques from there. And, so what I think we took from that was, don't be afraid to take the best influences you can. Don't be afraid to sort of go around and look at other co-works, but look at other places, look at, hotels, look at, how can you make a space feel good? Where are you going to get those influences from? And, that's just basic research, right? I'm kind of pinning Bowie onto that, but that's one thing that fascinates me, because he was upper middle class, lower middle class. I'm not sure whether he was
I like lower middle class.
But
English people understand that, but
he was listening to Velvet Underground. He got into German space rock before anyone else. He got into drum and bass at one point, and we might not like the outcome, but he was always alert to these new things and incorporating them in his art. And I think that's something which I certainly admire.
I've always, I haven't done it quite to the level he has, but I've always been doing that. I think that's probably one of the biggest influences he's had on me from reading that book that I posted on Instagram. What's number 3 then?
Number 3, behave like a star. Tony DeFries, his manager, firmly believed that to be a star, you just have to look and behave like a star. So, because I've realised we're going to have to rattle through these quite quickly, but I think that's an important thing as well, to look good, to kind of behave like you're $1 million, even when you're just starting the place up. I think that's very good advice.
How can you do that with? Because there is a lot of I understood that because I've read so many things, but there's often the debate about fake it till you make it and stuff like that. And I think you have to live into where you want to go rather than wait until you get there kind of thing.
I think so. I think what we did was we thought this is important, right? This is a place where people need to feel they're glamorous in a way. And so you can't do that everywhere. You just, you can't have that in every corner of the space. So you've got to work out where you're going to do that and how you're going to do that and where it's important. What are the places that people pass through, that they inhabit, that you can make them feel like they're, a movie star in that little moment. Try not to make any of it mundane, but you have to accept that some of it will be, or less glamorous, let's put it that way. So, just kind of putting a bit of thought into what those common spaces are and how you can really get the most out of them.
That's great. So this is number 4 now, isn't it?
That was 3. 4, don't play to the gallery. He says himself, his worst work was when he was trying to please an audience. Tonight and Never Let Me Down are the things that I think of there, and I know that you're a big fan of one of those albums, so I don't want to start a
it's in the thing. It's like, even with Bowie and Prince, even stuff that's a bit crappy, I love it because it's them, and I appreciate their moment in their body of work.
Well, yeah. And to be honest, I'm not sure how this fits. I wrote it down this morning, but, when you think about it, we are playing to the audience. Our members are obviously really important to us, so we have to listen to them and take on board their feedback. So, I said to you earlier, I had sort of 4.5 points or 3.5 or something, and I can build on that. It's more of an instinct than it is a rule. Let's put it that way.
But there's you can come back at this if it doesn't work for you. There's more than one co-working space I've sat down with and gone so what do you want to do? Where are you going? And then and they've said some form of, we want to be like we work because that's what people want. It's like, actually, people come here because it's, Stephen and Ewan run this co-working space, or Bernie and Lorraine run this space, and they come for that person and what happens around them. And it might just, nearly all spaces are kind of like desks and chairs and internet,
right?
It's like what you create around it. So it's
right.
One of my favorite David Bowie things ever is he was he was on the Let's Dance tour. He says this in an interview, and if I can find the clip, folks, I'll chuck it in the show notes. So he's in this interview and he says, Let's Dance is going really well, and I'm working with Noel Rogers. I've never had it so good. I'm like more money than I know what to do with, and everything's perfect, but I still don't feel like satisfied. And then he says, I looked down at the front row when I was on tour in Australia, and I thought, they're not David Bowie fans, they're Phil Collins fans. And that's the thing, is your co-working space can either be like, David Bowie, Madonna, and Stormzy, or it can be, what's her name? It's going to come to me in a minute, but the one who's sang the Titanic theme track.
Celine Dion.
So it can be Celine Dion and Phil Collins, and completely middle of the road, and invoke no emotion whatsoever apart from maybe nostalgia.
I think you've articulated what was in my head a lot better than I did. I mean, that not playing to the gallery is exactly that, isn't it? It's kind of like, yeah, sure, you've got people that you do want to please, but you've also got to be kind of coming from the perspective that you're offering them something that you believe in. And I guess that's what I was trying to say. The last one, absolute beginners. Right. No training. We didn't know what we were doing. We felt our way. How hard can it be? Quite hard. Turned out to be the answer. But, there are things that you can improvise. And actually from that improvisation comes sometimes some innovation and some really good ideas. And I think, his lack of formal training is the only explanation for the chord sequence that's in Life on Mars, right? If you had musical training, you would never have put those chords together. And so, he just did what sounded good. And I think that is a sort of welcome injection into any business is not, amateurism. It's more untutored kind of vigor that if you can bring that and solve the problem, as long as they don't get on top of you, then what you'll produce at the end of it will be more interesting.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I actually, a long time ago, I had to stop listening to other people's podcasts, because otherwise I think, I know every podcast I did would be imitating 5 other podcasts rather than just, doing what I do. And even from like how the track sounds in the beginning, so they're like finding out how to do it, but then there's just like getting on with it. Lionel Blair's in that movie, just to go off. That's always intrigued me. So, are there any last thoughts on our hopefully our first of many podcasts about Bowie and co-working?
And no, you basically squeezed the whole toothpaste tube out on the first one, so I'm not sure how many more there are. But it's been great talking to you, and I hope that's of use to somebody. And if they want to correct any historical inaccuracies or just reach out or whatever, then
call our toll-free number.
Yeah.
And where can we find you online, and Contingent.Works and all those kind of end of podcasty bits?
Well, Stephen Somerville on LinkedIn is probably the most useful way of finding me. Stephen with a PA, Somerville as in Jimmy Somerville, Somerville. You should find me pretty quickly there. And Contingent is Contingent.Works. Yeah, I think it is.
That's it.
Contingent.Works. I suddenly lost confidence in our URL. Sorry about that, Ewan. Contingent.Works.
We'll stick all of that in the show notes, and I'll see you for Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars next Thursday. Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and attention. We, if you go to coworkingassembly.eu and hang around for, I think we're at 7 seconds now. One of those annoying but highly effective pop-ups will come on. Pop your email address in there, and we'll send you news about events and all the projects we're working on with like the co-working library, the Ukraine project, and this project, and the inclusion and diversity in co-working project. And thanks very much for paying attention. Be careful out there. It is a jungle. Say goodbye, Stephen.
Goodbye. Thanks, Bernie.
Bye.